Hello everybody, this edition of We Have Ways of Making You Talk was recorded before the coronavirus crisis began. Figyel Meztito, Figyel Meztites, which is of course Hungarian for Achtung, Achtung.
That's a mouthful, isn't it? That's a mouthful.
Yes, well, I mean, you know, I'm just reading what's written down in front of me. If you are Hungarian and you're now rushing for an air raid shelter, I've done my job properly. But if not, if you think I've just ordered a flatbread, anyway. Now we haven't talked much about Hungary's role in the war, but I think it's fair to say the nation didn't cover itself in glory. Right now, we've really upset the Hungarians. It joined the Axis powers in 1940 and took part in the invasion of Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union. In 1944, Hitler found out that Hungary was trying to negotiate an armistice with Britain and the US, and he didn't look so favourable on that, so in went the Luftwaffe to stiffen their sinews. It did not end well.
But of course, what they really did was, Eichmann went down and forced them to hand over their Jews, and that extra bit of railway was built specifically to hurry up the extermination of Hungarian Jews. At Auschwitz, the famous railway that goes under the archway, that wasn't there before. Built specifically to take them straight to the gas chambers. It's absolutely horrific. It's what the Hungarians went through in the Second World War is absolutely beyond awful.
Yep,
has to be said.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
on a brighter note.
Well, no, yes. So, first of all, how are you, James?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. I'm a little bit wet. With sort of biblical levels of water, wind, and now pestilence. It's a bit of a worry, isn't it?
And you're physically in Wiltshire, but your mind, the Holland mind, is in Sicily right now, right?
100%. Yeah. No, I'm completely, absolutely in Sicily. Where I find myself sweating just reading about it and writing about it because it's so hot.
It's quite complicated, isn't it? You've got that thing. You've got to squeeze. It's like a ship in a bottle. Often, I think these books are yours. You've got to get the whole thing, contain it, and it's got to read well, be exciting, be interesting, be entertaining. If you're honest,
that's always the challenge. If I was just telling the story of Sicily, the invasion of Sicily, it'd be a kind of piece of cake. It's absolutely that. It's that structure of it. And the thing is, the way I do these books, as you will now know, having spent hours, weeks, years of your life reading them.
It feels like it.
Yeah, you will know that there is a kind of sort of quite a well-defined cast list of players from kind of sort of top to the bottom, through which you're using to kind of illustrate the human experience of war. And in Sicily, you've got Italians, military and civilian. You've got Germans, you've got Canadians, you've got Americans, you've got different units, you've got people in the Navy, you've got people in the Air Force, you've got US Army Rangers, you've got Paddy Mayne and the SRS, you've got glider pilots. Yeah. Wow, it goes on, and it's just marshalling all that is just really, really difficult because, all of them have got these fantastic stories and you want to get that across. And then you've got kind of the mafia as well and OSS and all sorts of stuff. So it's complicated. Is it
more complicated than D-Day?
It's definitely more complicated to write. Yeah, it won't be anything like as long as the Normandy one, but it is complicated. But good fun. I'm loving it, and some amazing stories coming out of it. Just absolutely incredible stuff, and just hilarious stuff as well. Really, really very funny, and truly awful things as well. But I'm loving doing it. Excellent. And I can't wait to head over there with you, Al, when we go and do
I'm looking forward.
Our little TV stint.
I'm looking forward to the red wine pasta at sunset.
Nello Davila and all the rest of it.
Nigel has been in touch on Twitter and sent us a fantastic old letter from the Telegraph. Listen to this, ladies and gents. This is from Brigadier F.R. Steer, MBE, retired, Paddockwood, Kent. The Old Salute, this is titled. Sir, regarding correspondence on the term bollocks, there is a little-known example of its use to beneficial effect in 1945. Jackie Lord was the regimental sergeant major of 3rd Parachute Battalion and was taken prisoner at the Battle of Arnhem in September 1944. In his prison camp, he was the senior representative of the prisoners and challenged the German commandant over his failure to distribute Red Cross parcels. The commandant pointed out that, under the Geneva Conventions, officers were entitled to be saluted by prisoners, and once the saluting commenced, the parcels would be given out. RSM Lord returned to the committee through which he ran the camp and advised them that he had agreed with the German officers should now be saluted. The committee was disinclined to agree with this, but the RSM invited them to watch, whereupon he left the hut and sought out a German officer. Approaching the officer, the RSM whacked up an immaculate household division salute, looked him straight in the eye, and said clearly and with conviction, "Bollocks!" Believing this to be an ancient greeting, the German saluted formally and with a heavy accent responded, "Bollocks!" It was not long before salutes were being offered by soldiers of many nationalities to any German officer they could find. The Red Cross parcels were distributed the next day.
That's absolutely brilliant, isn't it? What a great story.
Sergeant Major of Legend, Jack Lord. He ended up at Sandhurst, I think, after the war. And there's a story about King Hussein of Jordan on the parade ground at Sandhurst with Lord going, "King Hussein of Jordan, sir, you are the scruffiest fucking monarch I've ever had on my parade ground, sir." Or something. Some story like that, apparently. Anyway.
Very funny.
My father's told me that many times. Anyway, now you've got a question, haven't you, James?
I've got a question, which has actually come from my wife Rachel, who wants to know about
nepotism.
I know, but
my daughter the other week, your wife this week.
Yeah, I know.
We have got listeners.
Jumping the queue.
We've got listeners.
It's not fair, is it? But her question is a good one and appropriate because you've been doing all your charitable work with blood and stuff at the moment.
DKMS. Yep.
Yes, exactly that. And so she wanted to know what happened with blood in the Second World War? How did people have blood transfusions and the kind of development about blood plasma? That's what she wants to know about.
Well, I'll be quite honest. I don't really know very much about this at all. I mean, what I do know is that the Allied approach to a battlefield medicine was comprehensively a million miles ahead of the German approach. And I can't remember who made this, but I think it was John Buckley in his Monty's Men book. He makes the point that because that's a very interesting book where he kind of says, well, hold on a minute. If the British Army's so terrible, he posits a simple question. If
it's
the British
a brilliant
so
book.
Terrible,
it's an absolutely brilliant book, and everyone should read it.
Really, really terrific book. He says, if the British Army's so rubbish and so terrible, like we keep being told, how do you explain the result?
Yeah.
And
he's got a point.
He's got a point, but one of the points he makes, I think, that's really, really interesting is he talks about field medicine, and he says that the German army, basically, if you look at the statistics within the German army compared to the British army, men dying of wounds is sky high, and men dying of far less serious wounds than British soldiers are dying of is way up there. And they don't have the field medicine
No.
the British have. They're not even close. And he says, if you're judging an army, surely one of the ways you judge an army is you look at how it copes with its own wounded and what it does with its wounded, or with the wounded. Full stop. And he says basically, the German army had not prioritised it, and whereas the Allies had, because after all, the Allies have got this thing where they know that how the wounded are treated is absolutely 100% plugged into morale, and that if you're hurt,
absolutely,
that you're going to be looked after well, and that's technology aside, that's medical breakthroughs, that's blood, that's penicillin, antibiotics aside, that's just like you're going to be well looked after, and you've got a chance of getting home.
Also turns down to this whole kind of operational level, and also their kind of prioritisation. And what the Allies very sensibly realised is that a huge amount of prioritisation needs to be put onto medical research, medical science, medical development, and also medical supplies. So it's no good just having the know-how. You've got to make sure that you set it up. And one of the first things they always do is set up field hospitals and all the rest of it, and aid posts and blah blah blah. And by the summer of 1944, wounded US men are 1 in 4 is getting back into the battlefield, which by 1942, by 1940 standards is absolutely, incredible. And the two biggest causes of death are, once you're wounded, if you're not killed absolutely outright, are obviously catastrophic blood loss and then blood poisoning.
Yeah.
So making sure people have got a lot of blood and clean blood is absolutely crucial to ensuring that your chance of survival goes up massively. And this is where the Americans particularly, and the British, both really win huge amounts of points. So obviously Alexander Fleming develops penicillin, and that stops the blood going bad. That's that's antibiotics, and that is a total breakthrough. And that's something that the Germans simply do not have. No one else has. The Allies do, the Western Allies do, and no one else. The second thing is blood plasma. And blood plasma is really, really interesting because one of the great pioneers of blood plasma is a guy called Dr. Charles Drew. And Dr. Charles Drew is the first ever African-American to get a Doctor of Science degree. And he's the guy who's responsible for this. And because of advances in refrigeration, they're able to develop, store all this blood and develop all this blood plasma, have blood, people are able to go to a sort of, blood bank like they do today, give blood, it gets stored, it gets put in a refrigerator, travels over the Atlantic or, into the Mediterranean or wherever it needs to be. Yeah. And then you've got all this blood being transferred from America, from Britain, across the Channel, into the Mediterranean, wherever it is, southern Italy, Sicily, Normandy, blah, 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 and pumps directly into people who have suffered catastrophic blood loss, and consequently they're surviving. And that is just off the radar, kind of modern by 1940 standards. Yeah. What we consider just absolutely kind of, absolutely par for the course today is new and novel in the 1940s. Yeah,
because one of the things that's interesting, for instance, about the Arnhem Battle is because they have no rear to send anyone to. Those are all improvised hospitals rather than actual proper, like an actual chain of medicine where people get sent back. And also that Warwick and all the MOs who went out to Arnhem have basically taken 2 days medicine with them.
Yeah, because
after all, space was tight and they were expecting to be relieved within 48 hours.
Yeah.
So so they end up having to do those sort of sharing. They share the St. Elizabeth Hospital with the Germans, or set up a hospital that becomes a neutral space. But the thing about Arnhem is it's remarkable because it's completely unusual. Is that there is no rear there.
Yeah.
Which is how airborne soldiers operate. They end up literally if they end up with their backs to the wall, it's their backs to each other, rather than the enormous tail, the operational tail that you're always talking about, that you would have, say, in Normandy. I mean, I think that the thing is it's all part of the morale thing. It's all part of, clean showers and beer and
cups of tea and Coca-Cola.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but then, I mean, in Burma, you have Slim shakes down the malaria thing, doesn't he? Because if you got malaria, you went on this sort of 5-month round trip, never seen again.
Yes.
Struck by the similarity between that and battle fatigue, where the thing they develop with battle fatigue, combat fatigue, is they go, right, actually, we're not sending you home, we're not sending you all the way back. We'll send you to an area close to the front where you're going to get a load of rest. You're going to get fed properly. You're going to make sure you sleep for a couple of days and get you back on your feet and back with your unit, because the impactful thing on morale more than anything else was people vanishing for no apparent reason, losing it. I always talk about this. I'm loath to say losing their nerve, because God knows I would have had none, right? So for instance, when you read, when we read the Spike Milligan bit where he talks about his breakdown, he's sent back to a forward rear area, if you see what I mean.
Yes,
he's not sent miles and miles back. It's basically casualty clearing, where they're casualty clearing people who've had breakdowns, get them some sleep, get some hot food into them, and then get them back forward again. And of course, he ends up in this dispute with his commanding officer because they haven't fixed me. I'm still not all right, and his commanding officer doesn't believe him. But the striking similarity with the malaria thing is that thing of, well, you know what? If we can fix people here and now, let's do that.
Yeah. Get
it done in a couple of days and get them back forward where they're more useful. They're useful because although obviously the Allies, I mean, the Allies are better at looking after people. They're better at looking after people because what they want them to do is be back on the front and useful.
Yeah.
Rather than, the Germans have this sort of wastage of people. Because
I think the other thing
they
about
don't kind of care.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, I mean, the problems they always have in Burma and in the Burma front is just that everything is just so far away, and logistically it's just so challenging.
Yes.
And I think, you think, well, hang on a minute, so Slim takes charge in kind of autumn 1943, and it's not until February 1944 that they kind of finally have a victory at the Battle of the Admin Box and stuff. And you think, God, well, why has it taken them so long? But then you kind of just rewind a little bit, and you think, okay, well, the early part of 1942 was when they were being defeated and being pushed back out of Burma. So that's 1942, careful. Then, by the time they get to India, it's the monsoon, so there's no more fighting over the summer.
Yeah.
So by the time the monsoon's gone, it's November 1942. So then they attack again in the Arakan, and it doesn't go terribly well. So that's the first time they're back on the offensive, and they've got to learn those lessons. Then by that stage, it's kind of monsoon again in 1943. So then they've got to sit back and kind of think about it all again. So it's, in a way, it's kind of not really surprising. It takes until the autumn of 1943 for them to actually work out what it is that they've got to do to actually go forward. And of course, sorting out the health issues is absolutely right up there as a priority. And you just don't have that freedom of kind of, you don't have those ready supplies of, you do have plasma and you do have penicillin and the rest of it, but you don't have it in quite the kind of readiness that you do in Normandy or even in Italy, for example. So you've got to just do the simple things right. And obviously one of the biggest problems you're facing is malaria. And okay, let's just think about this a second. Let's make sure that we all take, make an offence not to take your malaria tablets. And let's just think about this. Malaria doesn't have to kind of take you out of the front line for 3 months. Let's just make it 10 days, 2 weeks. And so you set up these malaria forward units, these MFUs, which are these little tented hospitals just sort of, 5 miles behind the line, not 250. But you can understand why it takes time. And I think sometimes that, I'm sort of going off on one here, but I think sometimes we're too sort of quick to go, God, what were they doing? Why did it take them so long? And you think, actually, it doesn't take them very long, really, to sort out an awful lot of stuff.
The monsoon, by the same token, buys them time.
It does, yeah.
That actually you used. I mean, this is the thing of using absolutely everything to your advantage. If you've got time to go away, figure it out, then you use that time, don't you? Rather than stagger from error to error. That's it for now. We've got to take a break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. We have some questions. Brad West. That's a...
Brad.
Does he play Batman? Brad West. I love the podcast, he starts. A very hypothetical question, but do you think there was a time during 1940 or 1941 when Germany could have negotiated peace and kept a large portion of their expanded territory? Well, Halifax thought that. Didn't he?
No, I don't think there is.
No, I mean, I agree. I don't think there is a time. I think once Churchill has basically got the cabinet round, that this just never going to happen again.
I mean, yes, if you dismantle the Nazi state.
Yeah, which isn't going to happen.
No, but that's the only way. That would be the condition. They wouldn't say unconditional surrender, but they would say, Hitler has to go, and the Nazi regime. And all your kind of unsavoury ideology, that has to go. And then, yes, we would.
But that is never going to happen.
Not in a million years, no.
Not in a million years.
Not in 1,000 years, even.
Well, in 1,000 years. Now, what if, however, the Germans have launched Sea Lion on the 20th of September, because on the 10th Hitler makes up his mind to do it. Sea Lion goes horribly wrong. Hitler is deposed by, Halder and Brauchitsch or Goering even. Right, because after all, the threat doesn't have to come from the Wehrmacht. It could come from within the Nazi Party.
Yep.
You could see Goering in the event of that all going wrong, going, all right, I'm taking over now. Then is there a negotiated peace where Germany gets to hang on to France and Poland and?
I don't think there's any negotiated peace where they hang on to France and Poland. I just can't see that at all.
No. Now the thing is, I mean, interestingly, if you roll this question onto 1942,
yes,
there are moments where Hitler is saying to people, we may need to find a political solution to this.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And then he changes, changes
his mind, because after all, that's what he does, is he dithers and prevaricates and changes his mind and flip-flops enormously, actually. It's what's quite interesting about him on one level is he's seen as this very definite character, but actually he's flip-flopping the whole time.
Yep.
And in 1942... He does sit down with people and go, there's probably only a political solution to this war, actually. And then people press him on it, and he goes, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
But we've got to keep on fighting.
We've got to keep him fighting, because after all, he's also in love with destruction.
Yeah.
And you know, it's in 43 where basically the Nazis radicalised themselves completely to the point of it's Ragnarok, it's shit or bust, and actually probably bust is where they end up in their thinking, isn't it? And everyone's kind of wedded to that by the end of 43. Certainly, they know they're going down.
Yeah, completely. I'm quite tempted to. I don't think anyone's ever really got into the mind of Hitler. I mean, okay. I do think. Hitler's character is just so interesting because he doesn't conform to the normal kind of total evil bastard kind of characterization, because he does vacillate, which stops him from being a total psychopath. You know, technically.
Really?
No, a psychopath doesn't have any doubts. That's the point. I remember talking to a psychologist about this.
Oh yeah. Well, yes, I suppose in that respect. I mean, you know, I think we could still. I don't think he has to hand in his totally evil badge.
No. I'm not suggesting for a minute, Al, that he should hand in his evil badge. I mean, clearly, you know, in top trumps, he's right up. You know, he's the top of them all. Yeah. But
he gets 10 in every category.
Category. Apart from breath and bad breath, he'd be 10 definitely.
Bad breath. Yeah. Bad breath at 10. Yeah.
But
anyway,
I mean, there was a Brendan Sims just recently did a biography of Hitler, which was just pretty impenetrable, it has to be said, and absolutely nothing about his character whatsoever. The Ian Kershaw is the kind of standard work these days, but there is also this German guy who's called Volker Ulrich, and I've read the first part and it's absolutely fascinating, and he's just got his second one out which covers the war years, and I kind of there's a part of me that just can't face reading it, and there's another part of me that really does want to read it, but I do think he's such a, there are so many contradictions, aren't there, and apparently this new biography does really kind of get to the bottom of it as much as anyone ever has.
The vacillation is the really interesting thing, and the prevarication, because there are so many stages of his career where no one knows which way he's going to jump.
Yeah,
and he'll be. I mean, and this is a permanently repeated pattern in his life where he says I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the precise opposite, I'm going to do this, and then he makes a choice and they embark wholeheartedly on that course of action.
Yeah,
and that happens over and over and over again with Hitler. And people talking about, you know, the characterization you get a lot is he's a gambler.
Yes.
He's an all or nothing gambler. And I wonder if you could talk to someone who really was a gambler and say, is this what it's like? Is your thought process like this? Absolutely every major decision Hitler takes, it's all the chips, isn't it? He slides all the chips across the table and puts them on red or black or whatever, or red and black in the case of the Nazis, right? He slides them across the table, and you know, the fall of France is exactly that.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, invading Poland is exactly that, because he doesn't expect France and Britain to honour their pledges. He does it again in 1940. He does it again with Barbarossa. He does it again and again and again and again. Yep. Although, I mean, I think, interestingly, in 1940, after the fall of France and while the Battle of Britain's going on, he repeatedly chickens out of the Sea Lion decision.
Yeah.
But I think that's the only way to characterise it, actually, is he chickens out again, and he just cannot make up his mind, and in the end goes, no, fuck it, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting, because we tend to look at the things where Hitler weighs up these decisions and goes, fuck it, let's do it.
Yes.
And not the ones where he goes, no, actually,
yeah, that's a really good point.
That's too big a gamble for me. We always look at the things where he takes positive action rather than the things where he takes negative action. And after all, that a decision to say, do a deal with Stalin, how would we characterise that? Is that Hitler? Is that a big gamble, or is that a smaller gamble? You know what I mean? Rather than attack Russia, because after all, the Nazi-Soviet pact, Molotov-Ribbentrop, when you look at it, actually, that's a sure thing. That there's every single reason for the Russians to do that, for Stalin to make that decision. There's every single reason for the Germans to do it, far more than there is for the French and the British to do a deal with Hitler and accommodate Hitler. And there's far more than there is a reason for them to do a deal with the Soviets, because the British and the French have no appetite for that at all.
No.
So actually, that's not a gamble on Hitler's part. The Soviet pact, it's a sure thing, and we tend to look at him in terms of the reckless gamble, the big chance, you know, and of course, because of the fall of France is a massive gamble.
Massive gamble.
And weirdly pays off. In fact, it's probably the only one that pays off.
Yeah, and he lives off it ever, and he never lets anyone forget about
out on
it.
that forever.
Yeah, I mean that's what the Battle of the Bulge is all about.
But while we're trying to open the can of mental worms that is Adolf Hitler, we have a question that I think feeds into this.
Go on, then.
Hi guys, fascinating podcast. I mean, it is right now. This is fascinating. Let's just say this. It's from Nick in Sydney. He says, having seen the Leni Riefenstahl photo at the massacre in Konski in Poland, I wondered what was the worst atrocity Hitler personally saw in World War II. Did he ever kill anyone personally, or did he always get other people to do it for him? If, when he witnessed the actual horrific effects of his orders, did this change his subsequent short-term behaviour, or is this hopelessly naive? Keep up the good work. Cheers, Nick in Sydney. Well, that's an excellent question.
Really good question. Well, arguably he killed his niece, didn't he? But apart from that, and obviously he's killed people. He killed people in the First World War. But no, I mean this is the whole point. Is he didn't go around killing people, and he never actually said, "I want you to exterminate 6 million Jews" either.
Well, as far as we know, he didn't, because
no record of it. In Gitta Sereni's book, there's a story about Himmler going to see Hitler, and Hitler would do these one-on-one briefings with the people right at the top, so that basically no one ever knew what had been said. And there's a story of Himmler going in and coming out like 2 hours later and sitting in a chair and basically like looking really devastated, saying, "Oh, the stuff that's asked of me, blimey, the things I've got to do around here to keep the boss happy." And that even even Himmler was shockable, but Himmler notably is a guy who went to see what was going on, which is why he wanted he said it's
why it's too upsetting
for the guys who are having to do it. For
the guys who are having to do it, the gore and the blood and the brains of murdering people was too upsetting for his people, because after all, he had his the SS was his little kingdom within Nazi Germany. He was worried about the well-being of his people having to do this, which is why they switched to industrial, scientific methods.
It's absolutely amazing, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And that is really incredible. And I think that's as close as we get, isn't it, to Hitler?
But Hitler sees absolutely nothing. I mean, he sees nothing in the war. Yeah. He does his 2-hour trip of Paris at kind of 5:30 in the morning. And he does a little tour through there. But I mean, he's famous for never going anywhere. I mean, it's one of his big problems is he doesn't have the geopolitical understanding of many other world leaders, because his world outlook is incredibly myopic, and he doesn't see anything. I mean, he spends certainly the second half of the war, large part of it is spent underground in a bunker, like a wolf. I mean, he's, that's why they're all called the wolf's lair. He's obsessed with wolves. It all goes back to Wagner and Woods and all this kind of stuff. It's all kind of weirdly caught up in his psyche. But I mean, he doesn't travel. He doesn't go visit battlefields. He doesn't go to the front. I mean, George VI does more visiting of the front than Hitler does by a country mile. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary.
But his mailbag, for instance. I mean, say the T4 program, which is the euthanization or whatever you want to call it, of disabled children. That starts with a letter to Hitler from these parents saying, "We've got a child who's in a basically persistent vegetative state." If I recall, right, I may get this wrong, right? And they write to him and say, "Look, it's a real burden on us. It's a burden on the Reich. And our child is suffering. What can we do about it?" So then what happens, and I think Kershaw makes this point, then what happens is someone, whether Hitler reads the letter or not, someone goes, "Well, there's obviously a solution to this." And so they set up the thing on Tiergarten 4 where they got doctors, and the doctors are murdering disabled children. And you wonder if he knew. You don't even know if he knew that they were doing that. He probably did.
Yeah.
He probably approved. I mean, it's a while since we talked about the Kershaw book, and you're right. It's a long while since I've read that, so I don't remember the actually how up to speed he was on the T4 program, on the Tiergarten 4 program, which then of course led to, there were protests. There was other males saying, "I don't like it." The church poured scorn on it, and then it kind of went underground. What clearly happened is he gets a letter, they initiate a program, and he doesn't then think, actually this is people being killed, he thinks this is fine. If he knew, I mean, the extent to which he knew about it. I mean, it's such an interesting question because he is in this sort of detached space away from it. But his immediate confidence knew exactly what was going on and had seen it for themselves. So
yes, but he isn't going around seeing. He doesn't go and see people being executed. You know, he's not seeing people being guillotined in the central prison in Berlin. You know, he's not going to the front and witnessing the massacre of Jews. He's not even seeing his own men being killed. I mean, you know, or bloody. I mean,
but the July plot accused, he does watch a film of them being executed, doesn't he?
Yes, but again, he's still not seeing it for kind of 100% real.
It's at arm's length, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, he is. It's extraordinary. Not unlike Stalin, who absolutely has killed people with his own hands and quite happy to shoot people. I mean, very very few, if any. No, there's a few, but there's hardly any senior commanders are executed by Hitler on Hitler's orders. He just sacks them. And he also pays lots of them money to kind of keep in his pocket. I mean, he sacks them and very often brings them back because he's only got the pool of talent is only so large. Well, that's an excellent question. Yes.
I'm going to go right. I'm going back to Kershaw and Frank McDonough. It's Frank McDonough, isn't it?
Frank McDonough, yeah.
Well, and he's just published a second volume about Hitler, hasn't he? So. Maybe the answer lies therein. Well, I think we just heard the all clear there, James. Time to turn in and make sure the blackout is fixed in place. Get in touch the usual ways, please. Twitter using the hashtag. And, of course, the podcast's Twitter account @WeHaveWaysPod. We will see you all soon.
Cheerio.